Good evening. I hope this finds you all doing well. I'm going to have the reading for today from the scripture and then the sermon. I'm going to have the sermon from January 17th, 2021. First, we'll have the reading. John chapter 1, verses 40 through 51. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two who heard what John had said and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah, that is the Christ," and he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which when translated is Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to leave for Galilee. Finding Philip, he said to him, "Follow me." Philip, like Andrew and Peter, was also from the town of Bethsaida. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one Moses wrote about in the law, and about whom the prophets also wrote, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph." "Nazareth? Can anything good come from there?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here truly is an Israelite in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." Then Nathanael declared, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said, "You believe because I told you. I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." He then added, "Very truly I tell you, you will see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." So as we continue to look in the life of Jesus, we come to the part where Jesus was gathering his disciples. Last week we talked about his baptism, and now we're moving on to where he's starting his earthly mission, and he's gathering his disciples. Two former disciples of John the Baptist have started following Jesus, and they in turn start bringing others to Jesus as well. Andrew was one of the disciples of John the Baptist that started following Jesus, and he goes and gets his brother Simon. Notice how Andrew is introduced. He is called Andrew, Simon Peter's brother. We haven't even been introduced to Peter yet in the story, but already it's assumed people know who Peter is. We have to realize that the Gospel of John is written at a time when people already know something about Jesus and Peter. John is just giving people the background of the story of Jesus. And don't we do the same thing whenever we have somebody new come into a group? We want to find out who they're related to, where they're from, where they work, all this stuff, and just trying to put them into where do they fit into our little society here. I know when I got together with teachers in the teachers lounge eating lunch and just different groups I've been in, we always do that. We always try to find out, who is this and who are they related to and where are they from. And so that's what's happening here. I remember growing up, I had three brothers and three sisters, so I was known as one of the Herber's kids. When I was older and I married, I was Steve's wife. When Steve went in the ministry, I was pastor's wife. Later, I was Danny's mom or Ben's mom. And now I am Riley, Weston, Jesse, Allie, Bell, and Jake's grandmother and Stella's step-great-grandmother. A lot of time we're known by who we're related to or who we've associated with, or with the job we have. I was the fax teacher at Northeast High School, or now some people in Fort Scott know me as the paraprofessional that works at Fort Scott High School, or they would know me as the preacher's wife. They also might know me, oh, she's the gal that's the Methodist minister at Stark and Redfield. Andrew doesn't get a lot of press in the Bible like Peter does, but he is the one that brought Peter to Jesus. Peter evidently doesn't become a disciple right away at this point, because later Jesus will call Peter to follow him while he is cleaning his fishing net. That is why the way it works sometimes, the person responsible for bringing someone significant to Jesus doesn't always get the recognition. After all, we have all heard of Billy Graham, but who knows the name of the person that brought Billy Graham to Christ? And his name is Billy Sunday. I think something we can see in the Bible or in this is that the first time someone encounters Jesus, they don't always become a follower right away. they may not be ready to make that commitment right off the bat. Peter will later be called by Jesus and make that commitment. The next person that comes across Jesus' path is Philip. He is from the same town as Andrew and Peter, and no doubt knows them quite well. This is the first person Jesus actually calls himself. Philip then, like Andrew, goes and finds a friend, Nathanael, and tells him about Jesus. Nathanael is a little skeptical when he learns that Jesus is from Nazareth. He says, "Can anything good come from Nazareth?" Nazareth evidently didn't have a good reputation. I know you can probably think of some places that you would think nothing good would come from. Philip tells Nathanael, "Come and see. Come check it out for yourself." Isn't that the way evangelism works best, when someone experiences Jesus for themselves? Someone can tell them lots of information, but for them to really understand who Jesus is, they need to experience him for themselves. Another thing we see here is most people are brought to Jesus because of somebody told them about him. Over the years, Steve and I have learned that people come to Christ and people grow in their relationship with Jesus through relationships. When we were in college, we saw, and a lot of people with evangelism thought that you could just go up to a stranger, start and pick up a conversation with them and share something like the four spiritual laws with them, and they would come to Christ. Well, that would happen sometimes if you happen to be at the right place at the right time, but mostly that didn't work. And now Steve and I are a little older and wiser, I hope, and we realize that most people come to Christ and grow in Jesus through relationships. All of us have no doubt someone in our lives that told us about Jesus. It might have been our mothers or fathers, grandparents, aunt or uncle, a friend or a relative, or a Sunday school teacher. Very few people just discover Jesus on their own. Oh, I'm not saying it's not possible that somebody could pick up a Bible and read it and learn about Jesus, but that's rare. Of the four disciples talked about in the passage, Andrew, Peter, Philip, and Nathanael, the one we know best is Peter. It doesn't mean the other ones didn't do anything important or their lives didn't matter. They just didn't get top billing. Andrew is most often mentioned as Peter's brother. Philip is mentioned as being the one that finds the boy with some fish where Jesus feeds the multitude. He is again mentioned when some Greeks want to meet Jesus and Philip brings them to him. Nathanael isn't mentioned again until after the resurrection when Jesus meets with the disciples. This is how most of us spend our lives, in the background doing the things that need to be done but not getting a lot of recognition. After all, what did Jesus say about wanting to be seen by others? In Matthew chapter 6, it says, "Be careful not to practice your righteousness in front of others to be seen by them. If you do, you will have no reward from your Father in heaven." And that's what most of us are, ordinary people. That is what the disciples were for the most part, ordinary guys doing ordinary things. Fisherman, a tax collector, and who knows what else. We really don't know what some of the others did and we're not told. They didn't have a degree from some great educational institution. They weren't among the religious leaders of the scribes and Pharisees or even rabbis. They were from Galilee, the backwoods of the Israelite community. We might say they were from Georgia, Alabama, or maybe even Kansas, maybe southeast Kansas. Yet Jesus called them to be his followers, and he used them to do his work. Things are not any different today. Jesus still uses ordinary people to do the work of his in the world. Oh, sure, there's some people that get recognition, that are in the limelight, that get books published and have radio and TV programs or internet sites and mega churches, and they're probably called to do that. But sometimes we're called to ministries that aren't in the limelight. Only about 10% of the people that attend church go to a mega church with a really well-known pastor. It all depends on where the statistics come from, but from what Steve and I can tell, about 60% of the churches in the U.S. have a attendance of 100 or less. There's another part of this story that concerns the one named Nathanael. Remember that Philip went and found him and told him about Jesus. He was the one that said, "Can anything good come out of Nazareth?" When Jesus saw him, he said, "Here truly is an Israelite in which there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked. Jesus answered, "I saw you while you were still under the fig tree before Philip called you." This tells us something about Jesus. He knows who we are, even before we know who he is, and he knows our heart. Jesus saw him under the fig tree. In those days, a fig tree would be planted near a home and used as a place to relax and pray. They didn't have air conditioning, so it would be a shady spot to go in the heat of the day. We can imagine that Nathanael is there thinking and praying and seeking out God. Jesus saw him there and heard his prayer. My own story, and I went over this last week, is that I was raised in the Catholic Church and learned catechism. However, it seemed like just a ritual to me and not a personal faith. And singing group came to the middle school I was at, and I ended up going to their concert that night. And there I heard the four spiritual laws. And in that case, it worked, and God had been working in my life, and I made a personal decision to follow Jesus Christ. And it wasn't just me doing these things to be a good Catholic girl for my parents. Then it became something personal for me. I was fortunate that there were people in my life along the way that took an interest in me and helped me with that. The first one was my high school home economics teacher. Not only did she spark a career interest for me, but she helped in my spiritual life. She hired me to clean her house, and as I remember, her house wasn't actually that dirty. I think she was trying to build a relationship with me. And I went on to her weekly Bible study she had at her home. And I lost track of her for many years, and then I became Facebook friends with her son, and through that I found out that she lived in Wichita, and she passed away this last year from complications from COVID. She would have been 80 something. And also in the process of finding about her funeral and people commenting on it, I found she had impacted several people's lives that had been student teachers under her, and they ended up being my colleagues when I was teaching family and consumer sciences, and she just impacted a lot of people's life. She was also married to the minister at the Christian church. So she had impact on a lot of people, and she's an ordinary person, and God really used her in her life. So come and see how God can use you in other people's lives and to do his will.